All right, Bulls and Bears, we're back with another dose. We got a lot of pretty big news to get into today. Another bank failure. Going to get into the details. Pretty surprising, actually. It's a small bank, but there's more to the story here. We'll give you my take on that. We've got consumer spending with a massive slowdown, but a certain segment of the population is actually spending not just more consistently, but bigger than before. We're going to talk about that here. Some of you may be surprised, but many of you not surprised at that news. And we've got a certain presidential candidate out there trying to connect with the working class people. A lot of you probably already saw the video of the former president out there handing out fries at McDonald's to try to gain support from, I think, from the lower income group, the working class, if you will. Well, let's go ahead and get into it right here. Federal agency closes Oklahoma bank, citing false and deceptive records. Well, first of all, when it comes to false and deceptive records, what about Wells Fargo? Remember the scandal with Wells Fargo? A few years ago, they were opening up fake accounts and a lot of other scandals that I won't get into, but did they get shut down? No. Why? Because they're so big that would have had an effect on the entire financial industry. But when a small bank does the same thing that the big banks are doing, it looks to me like they're getting shut down. In this case, they are. Depositors were shocked. Shocks residents. The First National Bank of Lindsay closure by federal agency after allegations of fraud were announced has residents shocked there. On Saturday, employees with the Federal Deposit, FDIC, could be seen inside the bank sorting things out for it to reopen on Monday. The bank location no longer holds the old name, with the logos and ownership changing. More consolidation, folks. What do we say would happen right here? The agency closed the bank on Friday due to what they described as false and deceptive bank records. Again, Wells Fargo's still around. Why is that? If you look down there at the parking lot, there's probably 50 or 60 people inside the bank at this morning trying to get things in order so they can open up Monday at 9 o'clock. So 50 to 60 employees there trying to get things sorted out here. Some people that had more than $250,000 in the bank are worried, even though we saw people in Silicon Valley Bank, remember that in 2023, those people, even billionaires, got all their money back. FDIC came together with the Fed and basically just added it to the debt and just conjured up the money from the bank is still open due to an arranged with the First Bank and Trust Company of Duncan. The FDIC official said customers can still use their money, writing checks and making withdrawals from the ATM. More developments will follow. And here's more info here on the numbers. As of June of this year, the First National Bank of Lindsay reported assets of $107 million, deposits of $97 million, and about $7 million exceeding the FDIC insurance limit. This amount is likely to change once they get the full details. Here's the key part. FDIC officials say customers with accounts that are in excess of $250,000 should contact FDIC to set up an appointment discussing their deposits. So will these depositors be reimbursed like the ones in 2023? Or will they leave some of these or all of these people that had more than $250,000 out in the cold, right? So it's interesting they changed the rules for the bank failures in 2023. Everybody got their funds back because they didn't want to start a financial panic or a contagion of bank failures, because people would have really been scared if they wouldn't have got reimbursed. Even if the big money would not have gotten reimbursed, people would have been scared. That could have started a massive bank run, more contagion within the banking sector. Of course, they even admitted they didn't want that to happen. They did that to contain this. So why do they have these people calling the FDIC that have more than $250,000? Are they picking and choosing who gets their money back? Or is that the way that they're going to get their money back? Or will they say, sorry, you don't get your money back? It's going to be interesting to see. But I would guess I wouldn't say they have to. They don't have to do anything. But my guess would be it's in their best interest to give everyone their money back, even above the $250,000. Again, because the precedent was set back in 2023 where $250,000 doesn't even matter anymore, but yet they're still talking about the limit. They're still talking about the people that had more than 250,000 should call FDIC and talk to them. And what they're saying, discuss the limits. So pretty interesting. What do you think about that? So if we gave all these people their money back in 2023, why are we talking about it now? And why do they still have that limit in place if it can just be overridden at the stroke of a pen, so to speak, right? Pretty interesting. Let me know what you think about that, please, down in the comments. I'd be interested to hear your take on it. Here we go. Let's talk about this, folks. I can't wait until this whole election season's over. I just want to get it over with. We've got former President Mr. T out there at McDonald's cooking fries and working the drive-through window. Oh, folks. So I think he's going to be trying to get the bottom, the entry-level workers and the working class people on his side with this. Will it work? We'll have to see. My thoughts on it. I don't see much of a difference in the overall financial system with either one of these people, the left or the right candidate. But it is interesting to see what they're doing to try to gain support. We see that both sides are doing monetary incentives. One saying, Mr. T, for example, saying that there's going to be taxes that'll be eliminated on certain types of income like overtime and tips for servers and stuff like that. The other side's pushing more forgiveness, student loan forgiveness, housing down payment assistance, right? So they're both kind of throwing money at the crowd, so to speak, to try to gain support. And now this, what do you think about that? Will it work? And will that help his chances there in early November? All right, now let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. We know that consumers, for the most part, a lot of consumers are struggling, close to 70%, now more than 70%, living paycheck to paycheck. But even the paycheck to paycheck crowd has still found ways to spend money, namely going further into debt. But we have seen a slowdown recently. But the reason there's still an increase in spending overall is because there's a certain category or group, if you will, that are still spending, and not just spending more, but spending a lot more. And we're talking about wealthier Americans. Out of the AP here, wealthier Americans are driving retail spending and powering the U.S. economy. So it's kind of like one or two baseball players batting 500, and then the rest of the team is batting like 150 or 200. They're going to bring up the average, even though most of the players may not be doing that good. In this case, it's much more of a drastic effect because the wealth divide and the amount of wealth that the people at the top have versus the bottom 70%, for example, is so much more. It's more than just somebody batting 500 on a baseball team, bringing up the 200 batting averages. When you look at the team average, it's much more drastic in this case because of the disparity of wealth. So what we've been talking about here is actually admitted right here in this article. It's a trend that has surprised many, which really shouldn't surprise people. Why, despite being squeezed by high prices, Americans have kept spending at retail stores and restaurants at a robust pace. But a lot of that's debt spending. Most of it actually is debt spending. When people start paying off their debt, in other words, when they slow down their spending or stop their spending and start paying more off than they're spending, in other words, decreasing their debt, this whole economic illusion comes crashing down. So, of course, the name of the game is keep people spending money, down payment assistance programs, more lines of credit. Banks don't tighten, right? Only a few banks are tightening right now. Article continues. One key reason is a relatively simple one. Wealthier consumers, boosted by strong gains in income, home equity, and stock market wealth, have increasingly driven the spending. That's another thing. Economic bubbles gives people the confidence to go out and spend. So let's say your stock portfolio, your home equity is all elevated, then you're going to be more likely to go out and spend. But when the bubbles burst, it's a double-edged sword because people lose their jobs because the spending slows down so much. And then you also have the equity vanishes. And so even the wealthy start pulling back on the spending then. They say, wow, look at my home value decreased by 20, 30, 40, 50%. If the bubble's allowed to burst. Will it be allowed to burst? That is the question. But if they can keep the bubbles inflated and keep the economic illusion pumped up, so to speak, with this false equity or with this bubble equity or debt-based economy equity, they can keep this thing going. Why do you think we've seen so many countries go into massive to hyperinflation, right? Governments, the powers that be, the money people, the people behind the financial system, they would much, much rather inflate versus any sort of crash or deflation or dropping in spending and falling prices, because that gives it masks the real economy. And that way they can keep their job a little longer. That's how I look at it. So pretty interesting either way. Let me know what you think about that. The top 30% or so, the wealthiest Americans powering the U.S. economy. Next, and first of all, I apologize about the noise in the background. I've got some friends here watching some some football here. They're kind of yelling a little bit. The Economist here, why the West faces new inflation fears, right? So now economic reality is starting to come to the surface. How many times did we hear inflation is slowing, inflation has been tamed, it's under control? And how long have I been saying here on this channel, yes, slowing inflation is true, but it's still bad because prices are still going up, just more slowly than before. So now we have new inflation fears, and it's even being admitted by some of these mainstream news sources, including The Economist. Just a quick excerpt out of this. Central bankers have avoided celebrations and declarations of victory. They know full well that consumers and firms, stung by the highest inflation since the 1970s, would not appreciate them. In private, though, many are elated. The sharpest rise in borrowing costs in decades, dubbed the Great Tightening by the IMF, appears to have worked better than anyone expected. Well, I disagree, because you still see people forced to go further into debt just to maintain their lifestyle. Even CNBC in a recent article came out and admitted this. Here's why inflation may look like it's easing, but it's still a huge problem. And why is this? Because easing inflation doesn't help anybody. It's only lower prices and a lower cost of living that are really going to help people. But when you see lower prices, it's usually a result of a drastic economic slowdown, and then you have massive job losses. So when somebody loses a job, even lower prices don't really help much if you don't have any income. So that's the reason, folks, why they want to keep this inflated, inflation versus deflation. And that's why they got to keep the banks propped up. And you see more bank consolidation. You're going to see them cover the depositors even more than 250,000. Maybe they're trying to keep it on the down low in this case. They don't want people to know that you are protected, even if you have more than 250,000. That's the way I look at it. Again, please let me know your thoughts down in comments. I'd be interested in seeing and reading what you think about all this. The bank failures, Mr. T handing out fries, the top 30% powering the U.S. economy. Do you see that as what's happening? I think that's definitely a big part of it. Anyways, thanks everybody for being here. As always, keep stacking. Bye for now. Peace.